Have you ever imagined that after 10 years of living frugally to the extreme, after sleepless nights buried in work, after an entire decade of denying yourself every pleasure and comfort, you finally achieve the dream you once thought was out of reach? And then just a few weeks later, you receive an envelope. Not a congratulatory card, not a housewarming invitation, but a court summons. The plaintiff, your own parents. If you're listening to this and feeling curious, don't forget to follow the channel to join me on this extraordinary journey. A journey not just to reclaim ownership of a house, but to rediscover myself and a family I thought was beyond hope. I'm Emily Parker. I'm 28 years old and live in a small neighborhood in West Philadelphia. If you asked me what my greatest achievement in life is, I wouldn't hesitate to answer buying my first house entirely with my own effort. But as I just mentioned, that was also the moment that marked one of the biggest shocks of my life. A shock from the people I loved most. A shock I'm about to share with you, starting with the morning I thought I had conquered life. It was a quiet autumn morning, with gentle sunlight streaming through the small window of the rented room where I'd lived for nearly 4 years. I stood in front of the mirror, my hair still carrying the faint smell of wall paint, my hands bearing a few streaks of mint green from the night before. But my eyes sparkled because that day I was receiving the keys to my first house. I still vividly remember the feeling of each step as I walked into that house. Bare walls, creaky wooden floors, a single light bulb dangling from the living room ceiling. But to me, it was a palace. My own little palace. I burst into tears as I clutched the keys in my hand. It was the result of 10 years living on a $20 weekly food budget, sleeping on an old mattress borrowed from friends, and wearing the same coat through all 4 seasons. I spent the entire weekend cleaning, scrubbing every corner. I took down the old curtains myself, replaced the light bulbs, and polished the wooden floors with a homemade cleaner made from vinegar and lemon essential oil. That night, I lay on an air mattress in the empty bedroom, opened a cheap bottle of champagne, played soft music, and wrote the first line in my new journal. Today I have a home. Something no one can take away. I was wrong. 3 weeks later, as I returned home from work and was about to check the mailbox for flyers and utility bills, I noticed a thick yellow envelope. In the top left corner was the seal of the local court. I froze for a few seconds, my heart racing. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Plaintiffs Thomas Parker and Linda Parker. Defendant Emily Parker. Reason breach of agreement to contribute to the family fund. Amount demanded $95,000. I sank onto the front steps, my heart hollow. I read it over and over, unable to believe my eyes. My parents, the people I once loved unconditionally, the ones I hoped would reconcile after years apart, were suing me for not contributing to a family fund I had never agreed to. I had hoped that when they learned I'd accomplished this monumental feat on my own, they'd be proud. I'd dreamed of my father giving a subtle nod, my mother hugging me in the kitchen of my new home, saying I knew you could do it. But now, not only did they not support me, they wanted to take my achievement away. I don't know how long I sat on those steps that day. The bottle of milk I'd just bought sat unopened by my feet. The afternoon sun cast long shadows on the stone pathway. All I remember is that when I stood up, my legs were numb. I walked inside, locked the door, sat on the old couch, and stared at the lawsuit. A mix of emotions swirled: anger, confusion, heartbreak, and above all, betrayal. I thought of the years I'd lived like a shadow to achieve this. I hadn't called my mother on her birthday when I was 23, because I was working overtime. I didn't fly back for Jack's wedding because I couldn't afford the plane ticket. I'd sacrificed those moments to build this future, and now the people closest to me had turned their backs. You might ask, why would they do this? The answer lies deep in my family's history, a place where everything was calculated, recorded, and controlled, like a family business devoid of empathy. But that's a story I'll dive into in the next chapter, where I'll take you back to the old house in Boston, where I learned to make budget spreadsheets at age 10, where I once thought love meant obedience. You'll understand why I left, and why I never looked back. Some memories never leave your mind, not because they're beautiful, but because they're etched deep, like a fine knife carving into soft wood. For me, it was the evening when I was 10, sitting in the kitchen, clutching a crumpled receipt, my heart pounding with fear. $3 for what, Emily? My mother, Linda Parker, with reading glasses perched on her nose, her eyes sharp as a blade, scanned the expense report I'd submitted during our weekly audit. It's just a hair clip, Mom. From Claire's I bought it because... You already have 17 hair clips. What's so special about this one? Does it glow? I bowed my head. My hair that day was neatly tied with a pale purple plastic clip, the very item that had caused the crime. It was a typical evening in my Boston family. A 2-story brick house with a perfectly trimmed front yard, white curtains, with green trim and a "God bless this family" sign by the front door. On the outside, we were the model of an American middle-class family, polite, orderly, with nothing to complain about. But inside, that order took the form of relentless accounting. And I, from the moment I could recite multiplication tables, had learned to log every expense in a small notebook to be reviewed every Sunday evening. My mother set those rules. She was a brilliant, sharp, and chillingly disciplined woman. Nothing escaped her, especially not a single cent that fell from a wallet. Money doesn't grow on trees, Emily. When you spend without a valid reason, you're letting this family down. My father, Thomas Parker, was the complete opposite. A quiet man who left for work at 8 a.m., returned at 6 p.m., ate dinner at 6:30 and read the newspaper until bedtime. He didn't hit, didn't yell, didn't intervene. But it was his silence, his brief nod when my mother deemed me wasteful, that made me feel more abandoned than anything. I had a younger brother, Jack, 2 years my junior. Jack was the perfect child my parents always wanted, neat, obedient, and never defiant. He logged his expenses right after a purchase, kept receipts neatly in labeled envelopes. Once I saw him glance at my notebook and report to Mom that I hadn't recorded $2 for ice cream from Saturday. "You need to be more transparent, Emily," he said like a pint-sized auditor. I tried to resist. At 12, I wrote in my diary, "Mom thinks I'm a spreadsheet, but I'm a person." She found it because she regularly checked my room when I wasn't home. She didn't get angry. She just left a sticky note on the page. A mature person knows how to manage finances. By 14, financial reporting had become routine, like brushing my teeth, eating dinner, or doing homework. But instead of making me the disciplined child Mom wanted, it made me obsessed with control. I started hiding money. Under the mattress, in pencil cases, even entrusted to my best friend. They weren't large sums, $5, $10, but to me, they were freedom. I used them to buy notebooks, write stories, buy used books from the shop near school, things my mother deemed unnecessary spiritual luxuries. One of my most unforgettable memories was my 15th birthday. Mom gave me an Excel tablet, not for games or studying, but for personal expense tracking. "You'll thank me later," she said. I remember spending that entire night entering my monthly snack purchases. Jack, on the other hand, loved it. He even suggested Mom create a point system, those who saved more earned rewards. I always lost, and the prizes were things I didn't need, like extra time on the family's color printer, or a personal budgeting session with Mom. Whenever friends came over, I hid the expense trackers tucked away, annotated receipts, and pretended everything was normal. No one could know I had to ask Mom's permission to buy a bag of chips, or that I'd been punished for spending over $5 at a bookstore. I didn't hate my parents. I just didn't understand why everything had to be so rigid. Why every financial move I made was seen as a threat to the family's stability. And then one day, I found a piece of the puzzle. I was 17, preparing college applications. One day after school, I came home early and saw Mom at the dining table with a stack of letters. Among them was an envelope with the University of Michigan's seal, my secret dream school. When I asked, she said it was promotional mail. But that night, I fished the envelope from the trash and opened it. It was a full-ride scholarship acceptance letter. I froze. The next day, I confronted her. She was clear. "You don't need a fancy college. Stay home, go to community college, contribute to the family fund, that's what you should do." For the first time, I felt like I wasn't a family member, but a controlled resource. That night, I began planning my escape. I opened a bank account using a friend's address. I got an extra job at a coffee shop. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I started seeing my father not as a pillar of support, but as someone who watched me suffocate without saying a word. Jack remained the same, still acing expense tracking, still reporting on his sister when needed. But I had changed. I vowed to myself that one day I'd have my own account, my own house, my own life, where no one checked my receipts. There's a moment in life, a silent but irreversible turning point, where you can't go back. For me, it came on a March afternoon with lazy spring sunlight filtering through the roof, when I, a 17-year-old girl, accidentally discovered that my future had been hidden from me. I didn't know what I expected when I opened the filing cabinet in Mom's study. I was looking for a transcript copy to complete my college applications. Instead, my hand brushed against a thick stack of letters bound in a large yellow envelope unlabeled. Curious, I opened it. The first letter stopped me cold. "Congratulations, you've been awarded a full scholarship to the University of Michigan. Not just tuition, but housing, books, and living expenses. A ticket to escape Boston, the expense trackers, the endless family meetings." But it had been hidden. Hidden so well I almost never knew it existed. I carried the envelope to the kitchen. Mom was chopping vegetables for dinner. I placed the letter on the table, silently watching her. "Where did you find this?" she asked, her voice steady and surprised. "Why didn't you give it to me? It's a full scholarship." "My dream school." Mom set the knife down. "Because you don't need to go far. Everything you need is here. Community college is enough. You'll live at home, save money, and most importantly, contribute to the family fund." The air around me felt thick. "You don't have the right to decide for me." "Don't talk to me about rights, Emily. This family raised you, taught you. You have a duty to give back." Dad walked in at that moment. I turned to him, searching for an ally. "What do you think? Do I have the right to choose my future?" He looked at me, his eyes neither angry nor kind, just silent. That night I didn't eat dinner. I went to my room, locked the door, and opened my laptop. I wrote an enrollment confirmation email. Then I started planning my departure. I asked my best friend Nora to help open a bank account using her address. I took on evening shifts at the coffee shop near school. I applied for additional scholarships. I calculated every dollar: travel costs, dorm fees, textbooks, even cold medicine for sudden winter nights. No one at home knew. I went through the motions, still logged expenses, still answered yes when asked. But inside, I'd stepped out of that suffocating circle. A month later, I received final confirmation from the university I was accepted with initial travel cost support. I decided to tell the truth on a Friday night. We ate dinner as usual: grilled meat, steamed vegetables, mashed potatoes. Jack talked about his economics presentation. Mom asked about my monthly expenses. I set my utensils down. "I'm leaving Boston in August. I got a scholarship to Michigan and I'm going." No one spoke for a few seconds. Mom broke the silence first. "No, you're not. I've made that clear. I did it all on my own. I don't need anything from the family anymore." Dad took a deep breath, looking at me for the first time in weeks. "If you go, don't expect anything from us. Not a cent. Not a word. Not a hug." I nodded. "I know." Jack, still silent, stared at me like I'd just set the table on fire. As I stood up, I saw his eyes not angry but bitterly disappointed. That night I packed 2 suitcases, one for clothes, the other for books, papers, and a small framed photo me in 5th grade, grinning by the purple flower fence Mom planted. I left the next morning. No one saw me off. I dragged my suitcases across the front yard, where the grass was still neatly trimmed as always. I didn't cry. I just felt empty. I boarded the bus to the train station, my heart heavy as stone. But as the train left Boston, I looked out the window and knew I wasn't abandoning my family. I was just finding a place where I could breathe. At Michigan, I started from scratch. A tiny dorm, a stranger for a roommate, packed classes, and 2 part-time jobs. I washed dishes in the cafeteria and entered data for the library. I worked late, slept 4 hours a night. No one from my family called. I didn't reach out either. I learned to do everything myself: fix a leaky faucet, mend clothes, file taxes. I wrote in my journal I can be weak, but I won't go back. On holidays, I took extra shifts for double pay. I watched friends go home, post photos of parties and family dinners, while I folded tablecloths in a restaurant or wrapped gifts at a supermarket. I missed home, but I missed a home that didn't exist. 4 years passed like that. When I graduated, I didn't invite anyone from my family. Jack sent a short email: "Hope you're happy." I didn't reply, but I saved it. I thought I'd cut ties. I thought I was free. I didn't know that over the next 10 years that wound would linger quietly, persistently, waiting to be touched again. And then 10 years later, when I received the lawsuit from my parents, every memory, every crack, every silent glance, every expense check surged back like a storm. Some things you only recount after you've overcome them, not because they're too horrific, but because they're too persistent. They don't explode like tragedies, but drip like cold rain in winter, chilling you from within without anyone noticing. From 18 to 28, I lived like that, not to survive, but to prove I could. I arrived in Philadelphia at the end of the summer when I turned 18. The long-distance bus dropped me at 30th Street Station, and I dragged my suitcase through noisy, unfamiliar streets, my heart pounding, as if I were fleeing, not starting a new chapter. I rented a room smaller than my dorm, barely 100 square feet. No windows, in an old house with 3 other tenants. Shared bathroom, shared kitchen, the constant smell of burnt curry in the air. But the rent was $400 a month, utilities included. I got a job at a small coffee shop near campus, evening shifts from 6 to 10 p.m., 3 days a week. Days were for classes and a library job. Weekends, I waited tables at a fast food joint in West Philly. Every dollar I earned was split 3 ways: living expenses, tuition, and savings. I didn't splurge. I didn't go out. I didn't eat out. Breakfast was oatmeal with peanut butter, lunch was a sandwich, and an apple dinner was instant noodles or rice with beans. I bought clothes from Goodwill, cut my hair with kitchen scissors. I declined every invitation to hang out party or join clubs. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't bear the guilt of spending $10 on a cocktail when it could be a step toward my goal. I had no close friends, no relationships, no confidants, just an Excel sheet, a double password-protected savings account, and a dream. One day I'd buy a house. A small, solid house that was mine, where no one could check my receipts or demand contributions. In my sophomore year, I moved from the dorm to a cheaper rental. I still lived frugally, but learned to optimize. I knew when Walmart discounted frozen food, when campus had free events, even how to dilute fabric softener for floor cleaner. I didn't let myself slip. I scheduled weekly budget reviews. I used apps to track every expense. I set up automatic transfers for every paycheck. I started freelancing, writing content for small websites, editing manuscripts, transcribing audio. Each gig was $50, $80, but I saved every bit. In my junior year, I had a bad cold that turned into mild pneumonia. I didn't have good insurance. The hospital bill was nearly $800. I cried in the dorm bathroom not from pain, but because I had to dip into my savings for the first time in 3 years. I told myself next time this won't happen. I upgraded my insurance higher cost, but I accepted it. I added an emergency fund to my plan. I learned to prepare for the unexpected. After graduation, I landed my first job at a small marketing firm. Starting salary, $32,000 a year. After taxes, rent, student loan payments, and living expenses, I had about $800 left each month. I didn't touch it. Every month, I sent it all to a high-yield savings account. I didn't check the balance. I didn't want to know. I just trusted my spreadsheet. Old friends started buying cars, traveling, getting engaged. I stayed in my old rental war shoes with worn soles, used a cracked screen phone. I upgraded one thing, my resolve. Someone once asked me, "Emily, is it worth it?" Lonely, exhausted, no one by your side, nothing to enjoy. My answer, yes. Because I wasn't living to enjoy, I was living to be free. No more mom checking expenses. No more dad's silent judgment. No more Sunday night financial interrogations. No more feeling like an investment expected to yield returns. In year 6, I got promoted. Salary $55,000. I kept my old lifestyle. I added one expense, mental health costs, because I started having insomnia, grinding my teeth, and heart palpitations. I didn't rest. I didn't celebrate. I kept going. In year 8, I hit $250,000 in savings. I allowed myself a $12 bottle of wine and drank it alone. In year 9, I reached $320,000. I cried when I checked my account, not from joy, but because I felt nothing. In year 10, I hit $350,000. I was ready. I researched the housing market. I learned to read contracts, appraise properties, negotiate mortgage rates. I printed a detailed home buying plan, every step, every fee, every worst-case scenario. I met with a realtor. I started viewing houses. I knew exactly what I wanted: an affordable, solid, low-maintenance home mine. No mom, no dad, no one else. I didn't know that dream built silently over 10 years would trigger a war I thought was over. In the next chapter, I'll tell you about my first house, about the feeling of touching its walls and knowing no one could take it away. At least I thought so. If there was a moment that made me believe every sacrifice over 10 years was worth it, it was when I held the deed to my first house. I didn't sleep the night before the closing, not from anxiety but from emotion. My dream, nurtured by skipped meals, declined invitations, sleepless nights of work, had finally taken shape in brick cement, and my name on the title. The house sat in a quiet West Philadelphia neighborhood, a 15-minute walk from the train station. It wasn't a mansion, no big yard, no jacuzzi. But it was a 3-bedroom with a sloped roof, a small backyard, and most importantly, it was within my budget. List price $290,000. After negotiations, I closed at $282,000, almost my entire savings from 10 years. I kept $20,000 for closing costs, minor repairs, and an emergency fund. When the realtor placed the keys in my hand, I couldn't speak. Tears fell onto the back of my hand. I spent the first 2 weeks just getting used to the idea this is mine. I walked from room to room, turning lights on and off, opened every kitchen cabinet, stood by the sink imagining what I'd cook on day 1. I bought discounted paint at Home Depot, soft blue for the living room, light gray for the bedroom. I painted myself, hands streaked with color, hair matted with sweat, but each stroke was a declaration I own this space. I scoured thrift stores for cheap furniture. A scratched wooden dining table I sanded by hand. A cloth armchair I stitched and added a small pillow to. Every item, however worn, was chosen with care because for the first time I got to choose. No one checked, no one judged. I started sending photos of the new house to a few close friends, those who stuck by me despite my declining dozens of meetups over the years. Alicia, an old classmate, came to help paint the living room. As we rolled on the second coat, she laughed and said, "I can't believe you did this." No help, no inheritance, no partner to share the load. Just you. I smiled, but deep down I knew something was incomplete. I hadn't told my family. Part of me still believed that if they saw what I'd accomplished, they'd understand. That leaving wasn't betrayal, but survival. That I hadn't broken the family I was just building myself. One Sunday evening, I sat at my newly polished wooden table, opened my laptop, and wrote a short email to my parents and Jack. "Dear Mom and Dad, I want to share some good news. Last week I bought my first house in Philadelphia. It's the result of 10 years of relentless work and saving. I've attached a few photos for you to see. I know there's been distance between us over the years, but if you'd like, I'd love to invite you all to visit. My small kitchen is always ready to cook dinner for family. Love, Emily." I also sent Jack a separate message. "Got time next week? If you're free, I'd love for you to come by. Lots to catch up on." After hitting send, I sat still for a long time. It wasn't an apology email or a defense. It was simply an invitation, a chance to mend if they were willing to take it. I didn't expect much, but at least I'd opened the door. 3 days later, I got the first response not from my parents, but from Jack. The call came while I was organizing my office. His name lit up the screen. I took a deep breath and answered, "Emily." "Hey, Jack. Thanks for calling. How are you?" Silence. Then a cold voice. "What do you think you're doing?" "Buying a house." "How?" I swallowed. "By working non-stop for 10 years. By giving up everything to save every penny. You know no one believes that, right?" His voice was steel. "Mom and Dad want to see you. Sunday, 6 o'clock. Come home. No questions, no congratulations, no warmth." When I hung up, I sat dazed. It felt like cold water splashed in my face, but I told myself at least they want to meet. At least it's a conversation, even if tense. That Sunday evening, I drove 2 hours to Boston, back to the house I'd left 10 years ago. The white fence was still there. The "God bless this family" sign still hung on the door. The grass was neatly trimmed. Everything the same. Except me. Dad opened the door. No hug, no smile, just a tilt of his body. "Come in." Mom was setting porcelain plates on the table, the set reserved for Thanksgiving. Jack sat beside his wife, Emma, hands clasped. We ate in silence. No one mentioned the house. No one asked how I was. Only when Mom brought out the apple pie did Dad speak. "So Emily, tell us, how much was that house? Some dinners aren't for eating, but for drawing a line. And some questions, when asked, don't just end a conversation, they can shatter a family." When Dad set his plate down and asked, "How much was that house?" I knew this evening wasn't about reunion. It was an unofficial trial. $282,000, I answered, keeping my voice steady. I negotiated a good price. Mom paused, her fork hovering mid-air. "So you saved that much money from a low-level job with no help?" I nodded. "I worked non-stop for 10 years. You may not know, but I held 3 jobs at once. I didn't spend on anything beyond necessities." Silence spread across the table. Not admiration, but mounting skepticism. Dad spoke. "We're not fools, Emily. No one does that without another source." I took a breath. "I have records, pay stubs, bank statements. If you need, I can show you." "Not to us," Mom said, setting her fork on the porcelain with a cold clink. "To the court. We'll show the court." I stared at her, thinking I'd misheard. "Court? What are you talking about?" Jack spoke now, his eyes no longer just disappointed, but angry. "You haven't contributed to the family fund in 10 years. You kept everything for yourself while Emma and I delayed having kids, delayed buying a house to fulfill our duty. And you quietly hoarded like no one else existed." "You talk like I owe you," I countered, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I haven't taken anything from the family since I was 18. Everything I've done is my own effort." "You don't understand," Mom cut in. "The family fund isn't optional. It's a duty. We've talked about this since you were kids. You can't just walk away and think you're free of it." I looked around the table. Dad frowned. Mom was cold. Jack avoided my gaze. Emma sat silent, hands clenched under the table. I whispered, "So what do you want now?" Dad answered like he'd rehearsed, "You'll sell the house. Use the money to pay what you owe. $95,000. That's what we calculated based on the average income you should have contributed over 10 years. I laughed. Not from humor, but disbelief. "I'm not selling my house. No way. You have no claim to the money I earned." "Then we'll take this to court," Mom replied, her voice unwavering, "and let the judge decide." I stood my chair, toppling backward. I came here hoping to reconnect. I had hoped, but if this is all family means, then I don't need it. I left the house with firm steps, but my heart shattered. It wasn't just rejection, it felt like being hunted. The next day I tried to work as usual, but in the afternoon there was a knock. A man in a suit handed me a large envelope. Court papers, an official lawsuit. Plaintiffs Thomas Parker, Linda Parker. Defendant Emily Parker. Claim breach of obligation to contribute to the family fund. Amount demanded $95,000. Request for a court order to freeze property transactions house until payment is settled. I sank to the floor, the lawsuit in hand, speechless. My mind spun. For years I thought I'd escaped, but they still held an invisible leash, pulling me back with the very thing I'd sacrificed my youth to achieve. I didn't cry, but that night I didn't sleep. I researched family lawsuits online. I read about moral obligations, non-binding family funds people dragged to court for unthinkable reasons. One thing stood out: when love is tied to duty, it's no longer love. The next morning I started looking for a lawyer. I once thought court was for strangers' disputes, not a place where a daughter faces her parents fighting to protect the only thing she has, her independence. But here I was, sitting across from Michael Green, a plain-looking lawyer with gray streaked hair and a calm, steady voice. His office was small, tidy, a strangely peaceful space amid the storm raging inside me. "I'll help you, Emily," he said after reading the lawsuit. "But this won't be an easy win. Your family is framing this as a trust issue, that you had a moral and implied duty to contribute." I nodded after a pause. "I understand. But if I don't stand up, what's left?" In our first meeting, Michael listed what I needed to prepare: pay stubs from every job I'd held over 10 years. Bank statements proving my income, expenses, and savings were legitimate. Lease agreements, utility bills, letters from coworkers, bosses, roommates, even college professors about my lifestyle and behavior. And crucially, any evidence showing no legally binding agreement about the family fund. I began a difficult journey, not to reminisce, but to prove my life existed. I reached out to old roommates Tasha, who'd shared a cramped apartment with me for 2 first years, sent me old photos. My tiny fold-out bed, the kitchen stocked with instant noodles, the expense chart taped to the wall. Fridge, still tell I about how you tracked every cent, Lily, she wrote in an email. I still tell that story whenever someone complains about being broke. I tracked down my thesis advisor, who remembered me as the student who never missed class, even with dark circles from sleepless nights. He agreed to write a letter confirming I had no family financial support during college. I went back to my old company, requesting a reference from my former boss. Allison, my coffee shop manager, offered to testify if needed. At night, I organized everything into an old box, not just documents, but evidence of a life no one saw but me. But when I turned off the lights, fear crept in. I dreamt of the trial. In it, Mom cried. Dad turned away. Mom stood on the witness stand, calling me ungrateful. Jack stood. And then I lost my house. Everything. A simple dream that woke me in the night, heart pounding like I'd run a mile. I drank water, stepped onto the balcony, and looked down at my quiet street. My small house paint still incomplete. My first real home. I whispered, "I won't let anyone take you, not even Mom." A week later, Michael had news. The court accepted the case and scheduled a preliminary hearing. I swallowed hard. It came faster than I expected. Michael prepared every argument. The core was 1. There was no written agreement about contributions. 2. I'd been fully independent since 18, living alone, no support, no sponsorship. 3. Every penny I saved was traceable through documents. No one can claim what they didn't earn, he said. I'll always remember one question Michael asked while reviewing files. "Emily, if they win, do you want to reconcile?" I paused. I don't know. I used to hope for that day. But now, I'm just scared they'll win. In the days before the hearing, I stopped socializing. I didn't buy anything beyond basic food. I feared any spending would be deemed frivolous. I lay awake many nights. Once I thought maybe I hadn't bought this house. Maybe I'd stayed in that cramped room living quietly. But then I looked at the wall where I'd hung my first painting, a college-era sea sketch. It reminded me I'd come too far to turn back. Not just for money, but because I believed a woman deserved her own life. The preliminary hearing arrived. I wore a navy dress, simple, professional. my color for strength. The courtroom was small, the air taut. My parents sat across the room stone-faced. Mom avoided my eyes. Dad flipped through documents endlessly. Jack wasn't there. Their lawyer, Mr. Wilson, a silver-haired man with probing eyes, seemed to dissect my soul. The hearing began with the judge's question. Does the plaintiff have evidence of a legal agreement? Mr. Wilson presented photos a letter I wrote at 1512 saying, I'll always be grateful and share with family Emily, and childhood expense notes Mom kept for years. Mom stood up unshaken. Your Honor, these show only our family's strict culture, not a binding contract. The judge nodded pensive. She turned to you. Can you prove you lived independently? I nodded, handing over a file. I can show every statement, lease bill, paycheck. I haven't taken a dime from them since leaving. The hearing ended. The judge ruled temporarily. There's no basis to freeze assets at this stage. The formal trial is set for next month. I exhaled. My house was safe for now. But the war was far from over. That night back home, I found a package at my door. No sender. Inside an old, worn notebook, it was familiar handwriting. Emily. To Emily. Dad read everything. Dad was wrong. Wrong to think you needed protection, but really you needed trust. Father. I trembled. Father's diary from my infancy entries about teaching me to tie shoes crossing the street to the day I left. Part of me broke. Another warmed faintly. Mom sat opposite in a navy dress with pearl necklace, and Dad impeccable in a charcoal suit, poised for a family portrait. Next to them was Jack, my childhood best friend, now refusing to meet my eyes. I stood alone with only lawyer Michael holding 10 years of documents, receipts, memories, and pain. The trial was over. Your Honor. Their honor. Mr. James, began this is a painful case. Linda parents who sacrificed their lives to raise their children, giving them knowledge, values, financial discipline. Today, when they seek repayment per a long-standing family agreement their daughter the defendant ignores, denies and hoards assets meant for the shared family. I heard those words feeling dense fog close in. Shared family assets, they called my sweat and tears their debt. A payment for daring independence. Dad testified first with gravitas. We're not rich, we prioritized education. Mom built a trust, a tradition as a tradition. Each member contributed to 20% of income since working for emergencies, school health, grandchildren. Jack was raised in that spirit. She turned away. When he spoke, she showed photos my 18th graduation, Christmas 15 dinner at 17 Christmas, as proof of tight family. Then she faced me, eyes red. I read Mom opened her accounts, taught her to budget from 10 years old. I opened her accounts. And now she claims no debt. My mother says she owes us nothing. Jack, my sibling, recounted his silent sacrifices, delaying kids, skipping vacations, contributing regularly. My sister never checked in, never mentioned helping, said voice bitter. He said voice bitter, and now with a house she thinks she's done. Being targeted by 3 family members silenced me. But when Michael rose, I gripped my hands, bracing. Your Honor. Honor, he started. We don't dispute the family's strict culture, but there's no evidence the defendant, Emily Parker, entered a legally binding financial commitment. Michael presented my savings account statements opened at 18 with a friend's address. She's been independent since. No support from plaintiffs since college. He submitted tax returns, pay stubs from 6 jobs, testimonies from roommates, bosses, professors, all confirming my frugal life, multiple incomes, no aid. Then he turned to Mom. Ms. Linda, you mentioned you lent Emily money in college. Was it documented? No. Cash, she replied, faltering. No withdrawal records or notes. No. Who families don't track that? Mom smiled faintly. Permit me, he said, eyes on the judge. Ms. initially claimed Linda stated no support, now claims loans. We note this contradiction. My turn came. For the first time, I didn't speak as a daughter pleading for trust. I stood as a woman who'd fought 10 years. I don't deny my parents' care, I said, steady. But demanding $45 for a fund for I owe a debt I never agreed to is unfair. I don't owe them anything. I presented my first-year financial plan expense journals, scholarship letters detailed part-time and freelance hours. My family taught me saving, yes, but not freedom. I learned that alone. The court recessed for 15 minutes. I sat, avoiding eyes, but once I glanced up, catching Mom's eyes, not anger, but weariness, like he'd just realized something but couldn't reclaim it. Judge Peterson returned. After review, I said the court finds no evidence of a binding agreement obligating Emily to contribute to the family fund. Anderson Fund. Parental care is a duty, not a basis for demanding financial repayment. I paused, clearly stating, the plaintiff's claim is dismissed. The family's claim is dismissed. Emily Parker retains full property rights. No legal debt exists. I gasped, air flooding back. Michael smiled faintly. You did great. I looked to my family. Mom sobbed. Dad stood still. Jack left early. Dad turned away. I'd won. I kept my house. But what I'd kept in that room, no judge could restore. But then something unexpected came. Back home, my mailbox held a parcel. No sender unmarked. Inside was a worn leather notebook. Familiar handwriting. To Emily Parker. Emily, I've read it all. I was wrong. Wrong to think you needed shielding. You needed faith. Dad. I froze. Dad's journal, his diary from my birth entries on teaching me to lace shoes, crossing roads to my departure. Part of me shattered, another faintly warmed. Some gifts arrived late, but at the right moment. I received an unmarked package at my doorstep on a dreary Saturday morning. Among bills and flyers, a gray box tied with clumsy twine stood out, as if wrapped by unsteady hands. Someone I recognized my name on the label, immediately Dad's handwriting. I brought it inside, placing it on the kitchen table. Inside was a tattered leather notebook, a few faded photos, and a small folded note. I opened the book. The scent of old paper mixed with faint peppermint Dad's study smell from my childhood. My heart twinged, memory pierced. The journal began on my birth. Jack arrived at 3 a.m. Emily was born at 3 a.m. Tiny, fragile red. I've never been so scared nor seen such wonder. Seen anything so beautiful. The next entry described my first fever at 3:03, him sitting by my crib all night, holding a cool cloth, praying though praying he didn't believe. Then my first bike ride, he removed training wheels, jogging beside me on Boston's sidewalks, falling, but yelling, "You're doing it to keep my looking back." I turned the page. Jack failed math at 11, Emily. He hid skipping class crying. I knew Linda scolded, called him weak. I knew he needed a hug, not critique. I failed silent. I stopped, tears staining pages. Each line was a quiet witness, a flawed father loving his daughter. His way, he thought best yet, drove her to flee to be herself. The last page nearly dropped me. I was wrong, Mom, thanking Dad for believing I needed protection. You needed trust. You needed... I froze. The line was in blue ink, unlike prior pencil entries. Deliberate. Had confession overdue. I set the book down, unfolding the note. Moments. Dear Emily, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't want your forgiveness. If you're reading this, I know you've seen my watch over your path, not in words, but through glances. Jack's updates, your private posts I glimpsed via a friend. I thought strength meant control. I know its strength meant letting you stand alone. If you'll allow, I'd visit the home you built. Stay well, Emily. Dad. I sat silent. No Mom's words from Mom. No apology needed. No promises. But Dad's silence, the quiet man behind Mom's voice, now roared louder than any trial defense. I didn't know if this was forgiveness's start or a gentler end to a deep cut. But one thing I didn't want this door closed. Not with him. That night I sat by the living room window lamplight, on my scarred wooden table where I'd cried fearing loss here. My fingers shook, typing an email attaching a photo of my olive green kitchen. Dad, Emily, I got your journal. The house is open if you'd like to visit. No words needed. Just you here. Your daughter, Emily. I copied Mom, adding, I know you're not ready. I still hope. I still hope. Months was all I dared hope after losses. But that night I left my window open, like letting my heart try again. And I didn't expect who knocked first. I don't know what made them agree to come. Maybe my handwritten letter post-trial asking no apologies, just, if you'd like, I'm always open to host. Dinner maybe Saturday. I'll cook. Maybe it was Dad's old journal rekindled a dormant memory. Or maybe it was the void after battle, everyone needing a place to breathe. Saturday, Philadelphia's skies drizzled. I cleaned from mourning, not for mess, but to calm my restless mind. I set the table, arranged plates. My tiny kitchen smelled of honey-roasted chicken and garlic butter bread. Emma wasn't a chef, but I believed in the sincerity of each dish. The first meal in my first home. And perhaps, after nearly a decade, the first dinner with my parents without expense interrogations. 5:58 p.m. I heard a car stop outside. No horn, no slamming door like my childhood visits, just a soft, hesitant sound. I opened the door. Dad stood ahead holding his familiar black umbrella, Mom behind, with a foil-covered tray. Mom hugged me. Hello, dear. I said, eyes gentle, but not warm. I took it, instantly recognizing the aroma apple cinnamon baked butter Mom's apple pie from my childhood birthdays. Thanks, Mom, I said softly. She nodded. I stepped inside. Few words were spoken. Mom hung his coat. Mom surveyed the space eyes on my freshly painted walls. My hand-built shelf, the second-hand dining set I restored over 2 weeks. Neat, Dad commented. I smiled. Throughout dinner, no one mentioned the lawsuit money or family fund. No apologies. But no blame either. No sharp glances, no accusing tones. Just silence. A silence not tense, but like a restful note after chaos. Mom shared bits about the neighborhood, the neighbor's lavender, the bookstore with a cozy armchair. I nodded, Mom's eyes less cold. Dad asked about work first time, neutrally, not controlling. Mom felt my heart soften, like the smooth tablecloth, not guarded, just calm. As dessert arrived, Mom's pie, I looked at them. I don't expect things to be as before. I just hope we can restart. Bit by bit. Dad glanced at Mom. She didn't reply, but cut Mom pie into 3 equal slices, placing them before us. In the kitchen's dim glow, the pie's warmth felt like a wordless reply. No miracle, no embraces, no tears. But a quiet evening, no fights. To my, that was a start. As they left, the rain stopped. Dad paused, looking at me. This house, better than you thought. I chuckled softly. Me too, Emma. No, Mom. Dad's hand rested on my shoulder a brief, real moment. Not a judge, just a father trying. Moments gone, I lingered on the porch, hearing their car fade. I wasn't empty anymore. Not full, but not hollow. Moments knew that if one peaceful evening was possible, maybe a morning of understanding could come too. Some messages don't need eloquence, grudges, or past citations. They just arrive. They change everything. One early winter morning as I made coffee, my phone buzzed. I expected no one, no news. The screen showed a name absent from my call logs. Jack. She's named Lily, if you'd like to meet her. I think it's fine. Bare words. No explanation. No apology. No formal invite. But my heart rang like a forgotten bell stirred awake. Lila, niece. A new life. Lily. A door thought sealed cracked open. That afternoon, Mom brought a tiny knitted bunny I'd made during sleepless nights. Lily never imagined my first gift would be for my nephew. Emily hadn't thought I'd meet her. I's apartment was quaint tidy. My knock echoed like a pulse. Jack opened our eyes, met first since court. No bench, no lawyers, no bias. Just us once siblings, best friends, kids climbing backyard trees. Thanks for coming, Emily said quietly. Moments his wife gave a tired but warm smile. Want to hold Lily? Lily nodded. My hands trembled, slightly taking her. She was so small I feared a breath could sway her. I was so small I feared a breath could break her. Yet she was strong, breathing steadily asleep, despite our family's cracks, sleeping soundly despite our family's rifts. She's got your nose, Mom said softly, and we all chuckled. We sat in the first easy silence I'd had with my brother in nearly a decade. I broke silence. I was jealous, Mom admitted, eyes on Emily, confessing to himself. When you left, you thought selfish. When you bought, you thought lucky. I thought you were selfish. But really, you couldn't escape Mom's expectations. I resented you for it. And I was angry because you did. I didn't reply instantly. Mom touched his hand, a simple gesture, holding all. No need, I whispered. You don't need to start over. From here. With her. I nodded. Lily learned shouldn't grow in a fractured family like ours. Moments talked all afternoon, small things, Emma's violets, Jack's cooking, Lily's sleepless nights. But each tale rebuilt a broken bridge, unforced, real, 2 people stepping from silence's shadow to acceptance's light. As Mom prepared to leave, Jack walked me out. Rain misted. Take a coat. Don't vanish, Mom said. No matter what. Moments turned smiling. You too. That night home, Mom opened my closet, pulling old letters someone sent to Emma. Dad read Mom, written in solitude, kept in hope. I saw them not as loss, but as milestones. The journey to reclaim what was lost and find new. Moments sat at my desk penning my new journal's first line. Laughter was born November 14th. She brought a message love, if true, finds its way back. Lily. Moments I knew it was time for a chapter not just for me, but us all. 2 years after grasping that verdict, Mom stood at my gate. Emily held a paintbrush shirt, flecked with mint green home-hearing laughter from my backyard. Barbecue smoke swirled, mingling with calls, giggles, shouts, kids scampering, and I bloomed silently within. Mom was hosting a small party for 2 years since moving into my first home. That house was once a war zone, a dream, a home. I wept in alone at night, a home where I relearned trust and forgiveness. Today's magic wasn't the occasion, it was the faces here. Moments Mom on the porch holding a tray of fresh apple pie chatting with Alicia read. Friend Dad in a faded plaid shirt quietly painting the fence with Jack. And now I holding Lila, my niece Lily, the granddaughter whose first spark revived much I thought gone. Dad, moments once believed my family broken forever. Once I wanted to erase all ties to those who hurt me with words with law. Yet today we coexist in simple peace. No apologies spoken, no defenses rehashed, but they came not by force, by choice. 2 years I no longer live strictly frugal, yet balance stays my ally. Mom allows small joys a seaside trip, weekly blooms a fine meal for no reason. I read work hard, keep spreadsheets, but now I know money's worth isn't digits, it's what it builds freedom space for love. Dad hasn't spoken much since sending that journal, but he shares garden flower photos, asks what I'm reading. I suggested he fix my porch before winter. No atonement needed, just sincere presence. Mom still inventories ingredients cooking, but this time, bringing pie, she asked next time cinnamon or lemon filling. A small question, a big sign she's letting me choose. And Jack. We haven't said we forgave. But bonds mend through my watching Lila when he needs rest, or texts sis she's teething. Cries all night. I reply, bring her over. I'll soothe her. Moments are relearning siblinghood, not from expectation, from understanding. That party I invited friends, those who helped paint walls, donated old decor, cried and laughed through trials. They came bringing dishes, warmth. I said, Emily, your home's a collection of what's truly yours, not lavish but soulful. Mom smiled, sitting on the porch, watching loved ones gather. I once thought financial independence was the endgame. Now I know freedom isn't solitude unbound. It's choosing who to keep close, not from fear or duty, but true affection. My family will never be perfect. Differences, silences will linger. But I no longer see them through blame's lens. I see them as people healing like me. I choose to keep them not as burdens, but fragments of myself. As dusk fell, Mom set Lily in a hammock, swaying gently, her giggles chirping. Jack joined, handing me tea silent. Mom and Dad cleared plates, utensils in the yard. And I sat amid those I thought I'd never touch again. Moments fought to keep this house. Now I keep it to unite. Keep it as proof when we're strong enough to forgive, heart's cracks can become gold veins, like Japan's kintsugi mending pottery with gold. Family isn't just where we're born. It's where we choose to stay, if we wish. Thank you for joining my journey. If you're at a crossroads of pain and pardon, freedom or solitude, know, I hope you can define your home. Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't buying a house, it's learning to make it a haven. Looking back from that scrawny girl in a cramped room to the free woman in her own home, I see my greatest gain wasn't the house or court win. It was growing in love, knowing to say no to save myself, but opening my heart to salvage what could be. My story's imperfect like every family, but if we dare face, forgive, fear, choose love over grudge, sometimes old scars let light in. If this touched you, a memory, feeling thought, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear. If you think someone needs this, share it. Please follow for more raw healing stories like this. Thank you for listening.